Today I'm offering you this worship service for your pastors to be able to have a little break and for your worship team to have a break as well. I'm thankful to our district team for helping to put this together for churches all across the Alexandria District who may choose to use it, and I'm honored that you would choose to do so. We're focusing on the theme, Rejoice with Me. And the scripture passage is from the 15th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Luke. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulder and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or, what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now, his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him?" Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. May the Lord bless the reading of this word. I've been thinking about a line that I read in a book about the last major global pandemic that happened about 100 years ago, the pandemic of 1918 to 1920. The book is called Pale Rider, and the line from the book says this: "Those who were in their mother's womb when the Spanish flu struck were the 20th century's real lost generation." The century's real lost generation. It makes me wonder, what are we losing in this pandemic? Vacations, graduations, jobs, homes, loved ones, life itself? Are we losing a sense of trust in what we can depend on? Are we losing hope for the future? Are we losing faith in our institutions? Are we losing faith in God? And where does the racial justice trauma and the racial justice movement fit in to all that is happening? What if we end up losing a year or more of our normal lives? What if we end up losing what we once thought was the way things are supposed to be? What if we end up losing a generation, not so much an age cohort, but a kind of like way of living for a time? What if we end up losing the way we were used to living because of the lasting impact of what we're now living through? Even if we have never, ever felt this way before, aren't we now beginning to feel a little lost? So Jesus gives us this wonderful trinity of parables about being lost to help us understand, to give us hope, to show us how God is at work at times like this. 3 different parables, because not everyone feels lost the same way, right? Some of us are maybe like a sheep that wanders astray, not on purpose, but we just kind of lose focus. We lose track of others. We keep our heads down, chomping away at one clump of grass, and then without even thinking, just moving on over to that other clump of grass, not worrying about anything except probably satisfying our own appetite. And on we go to the next clump of grass, oblivious to the dangers that are lurking around the corner. And off we go on our own peculiar way, unaware that our self-absorption is leading to our undoing. We tumble into a patch of prickly briars, roll down the far side of the hill, and end up in some serious trouble. And we're not even sure anyone knows that we're even missing. But we are. We're lost. And we need some help. We don't need neglect or apathy because, after all, we're just 1 out of 100. Who cares about us? We don't need judgment or criticism because, after all, we're the ones who wandered off. Nobody else made us do it. No. What good is any of that going to do us? What we need is someone who's going to care that we are missing. Someone who counts every last sheep and treasures every single one enough to set aside their other concerns and focus on finding us. A good shepherd who will track us down, and when he finds us, instead of dragging us home with the crook of his stick wrapped around our neck, or the end of his stick driving our backside, instead of that kind of teach you lesson approach, he tenderly picks us up and brings us back to where we belong. He wraps us around his shoulders and carries us gently, speaking tenderly, holding on tight. Then, when we come home back to the flock, we don't really need this, but he does it anyway. He calls out to his friends, "Look what I found, my lost sheep, my treasure." He says, "Rejoice with me. Come and celebrate. Welcome her. Show her some love. Rejoice with me." The good shepherd says, "Rejoice with me." Can we say that together wherever you are? Say it out loud or say it in your head. Say it. Rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. Or maybe for some of us, it's more like being a lost coin. We get jostled out of a hole in a pocket and wind up in a muddy ditch. Or we get rolled along a countertop and drop into some dark corner. Or we slip into the crack in the couch, into a hopeless place where nobody will ever see us. Somebody has been careless with us, neglected us, undervalued us, treated us like we're not worth a second thought. And we're not sure anyone even cares enough to notice that we're missing. But we are. We're lost. And we need some help. Not blame or shame, not indifference or none of my business doublespeak, because we are, after all, only 1 out of 10, and they can manage fine without us. No. What we need is a determined woman who does not let anything go to waste, who knows that every single coin counts and will not accept the notion that some things are just not worth her time and energy. She will turn the house upside down. She will light every corner. She will turn over every cushion, every rug, look behind every curtain, move the furniture, pull out the broom, and sweep where she cannot see, trying to stir up some kind of a sound, some sign that we're there, until she finally finds us. And when she does, she carefully lifts us up and squeezes us. She carefully places us in her treasure chest for safekeeping. She goes a little overboard and decides to call the neighbors to share her good news. "Rejoice with me," she says. "That coin that I thought I lost, look, I found it, my special treasure. Rejoice with me," the good homemaker says. "Won't you rejoice? Rejoice with me." Let's say it together. Rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. Or what about this prodigal son? This wanderlust of a child, this wasteful, reckless, selfish boy who tries to find himself by satisfying his own base desires, as if that would do it. He scorns the love that has been his strength and his shield, journeys off into a wilderness of broken dreams, empty promises, uncaring strangers, desperate to survive, driven to extremes at his wits' end. He finally awakens to his identity. He realizes what a mess he has made. He remembers the dignity that he should have instead. And he resolves that he needs to go home because he's lost and he needs help. Not a lecture or a litany of wrongdoings, not a gaggle of gossips or a group of goody two-shoes gasping at his gall. No. What good is any of that? What we need when we're lost like that is a loving parent who's going to miss us night and day, but will not force us to return their affection. They eagerly scan the horizon at all hours, watching for us. When we crest over the horizon, they drop everything, leap for joy, and make a beeline toward us like nobody has ever seen. It doesn't matter that our clothes are in tatters, our reputation is in ruins, and we smell like a pigsty. When we're lost like that, what we need is a parent for whom it doesn't matter why we're home, as much as it matters simply that we're home. Who throws their arms around us, embraces us, kisses us ecstatically. We try to recite the lines that we have rehearsed about how bad we've been, but they cut us off in mid-sentence. Then they go off the deep end and call for this massive celebration. Rejoice with me. Bring the best robe, a shining ring, the fatted calf, music and dancing, food for everyone. My son was lost and he is found. He was dead and he is alive. Bring in the whole county. Show him our love. Welcome him home. Rejoice with me. The loving Father says, rejoice with me. But wait. Not so fast. There is another son, and he has a voice also. He says, What about responsibility? What about staying home and doing what you're supposed to do? Being dependable and conscientious and reliable. What about facing the music for your mistakes before you get the party music? The father assures the older brother that yes, all of that is important, and I will always value you for who you are and count my blessings that I have you. But none of that can cancel the celebration. The rules cannot override the grace. The righteous indignation cannot overcome the steadfast love. The judgment cannot overrule the forgiveness. Not in this parent's heart. This father pleads with his older son. It doesn't say exactly what the father says in that plea, but by now we're on to Jesus' pattern, right? We have a pretty good guess at what at least part of what the father says, right? He wants the son to come in, to share the joy, to catch the Spirit, to join the celebration. We know the words of invitation, right? What does he say? Rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. Exactly. It has to be that. Rejoice with me. It is the call of the good shepherd and the good homemaker and the loving parent. Rejoice with me. But who exactly is supposed to rejoice? And why? Why exactly should they do so? We find the answer to the who by looking at whom Jesus is telling these parables to. In verses 1 and 2, it says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So there's two groups of people, right? Tax collectors and sinners on the one hand, Pharisees and scribes on the other. People who know that they're lost, they need mercy, they're glad to hear what Jesus says. And people who don't know they're lost and don't think they need mercy, and who need to be persuaded and drawn in and won over by what Jesus says. So, it says, Jesus tells them these parables about lost creatures. A lost sheep, a lost coin, a lost child. They're all lost and then found. But the lost ones, they're not the ones being invited to come into the party and rejoice, right? I mean, they're already there at the party. Who is being called to rejoice with me? Isn't it the onlookers, the observers, who might think that this shepherd and this woman and this parent have gone overboard, if not completely lost it themselves? It's not the lost ones who are being invited to come. It's the ones who think they're not lost. They're the ones invited to come in. The scribes and the Pharisees are the religious folks who are supposed to have their act together. They're not used to thinking of themselves as being lost. If there are two doors on a building and one is labeled lost and the other is labeled found, the scribes and the Pharisees will definitely go through the found door. This is the paradox and the predicament of the privileged and the proud. They think they have it all together and need not associate themselves with anyone like those scorned sinners. But in fact, Jesus knows that they really don't have it all together. They have so much more to learn and to experience and to fathom. And where will they learn and experience and fathom what they truly need, even though they don't know they need it? Where will they get it? By coming in to rejoice with the ones who know what it's like to be left out and overlooked and undervalued and rebuked and mistreated and rebellious and broken and scorned, by coming in to hear the stories that the lost sheep is telling and the lost coin is scribbling and the lost child is pouring forth. Come, open yourselves to what those slights, those wounds, those terrors feel like. Because it turns out that being lost is not as simple as it sounds. Life can be complicated with mixed motives and messy situations and many extenuating factors. Privilege and pride do not provide immunity to the pain, much as the privileged and proud wish they would. Life is so much better, Jesus is saying, when we can get out of that bubble. Open our hearts with empathy. Go deep with self-forgetting love. When we can, as the prophet Micah says, when we can do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Rather than stand outside with our arms crossed, looking all superior because it's not right, or all resentful because it's not fair, rather than stand outside with our lips turned out, all pouty because it offends us, rather than stand outside shaking our heads all judgy because we're better than that, rather than any of that kind of attitude or that posture, Jesus says, come on in. Rejoice with me, everybody. Rejoice that God's love never gives up on us, even when we don't know we need it. He tracks us down and seeks us out and gushes in gleeful joy when he brings us home. It's not only the sinners Jesus is reaching with these parables. It's the people who think of themselves as righteous as well. Jesus wants everyone to come in and rejoice with him at this feast of goodness and mercy, this feast of compassion and forgiveness, this feast of justice and kindness and humility. Everyone is invited. No one is excluded except those who exclude themselves. Jesus wants everybody to be there. Everybody. That's who. Who should rejoice? And why? Why rejoice? It's interesting to me that Jesus doesn't tell these parables when a group of soldiers or King Herod's messengers are in his audience. He doesn't tell these parables to a crowd of fisher folk or farmers gathered beside the sea or on a hillside. No, Jesus tells these parables when he has the attention of the scribes and the Pharisees. He's not focused on the government, nor is he addressing the struggles of making a living in everyday life. He has other times and places for that. Here, Jesus is honed in on the religious folks, the ones who have influence over how people connect with God. Because it seems very clear that in these parables, Jesus is opening us up to the very heart of God. Jesus knows that religious people, of all people, should know something of the heart of God. He also knows that it is not necessarily so. He knows that coming from a place of privilege and pride can actually prevent people from experiencing the heart of God. So Jesus is very strategic as he seeks to persuade these religious people to come close, to lean in, to let themselves be stirred and inspired and opened up to receive something that they seem to be missing. He wants to get these religious folks who feel themselves to be in the found department to feel some compassion for those outsiders, those others, whose stories they would rather avoid. He's trying to get them into that party so that they can hear the sheep telling its harrowing tale, so that they can see the coin scribbling its heartbreaking story, so that they can experience the sun pouring out his hope-filled witness. Jesus wants the religious people to engage in this eye-opening, heart-awakening, soul-stirring, life-renovating community so that they can get a better sense of God's heart. Because it turns out that this is not just a nice little story about a lost sheep and a good shepherd who carries it home, or a lost coin whose homemaker searches diligently to find it, or even a lost son being welcomed with enthusiastic embrace and ecstatic joy when he comes home. It actually turns out that this is a picture of Jesus, the Lord of heaven and earth, insistently persuading religious folk like us, particularly those who can be thought of as privileged, living in our bubbles. Jesus is insistently calling us to get out of our comfort zones, come near to the heart of God, come close to the edge so that we can see with our eyes and smell with our nostrils the awesome depths of God, whose righteous love and holy kindness are so vast, so profound as to heal the inner psyches of broken spirits and at the same time to stir up the waters, to make a way for justice to flow down like a mighty river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream in the outer world of broken lives and broken ways. Jesus, the Lord of heaven and earth, is calling his religious people to be so encompassed and enveloped and enamored and enchanted by this awesome God that we will not stand aloof and apart. We will not shun our eyes or shake our heads. We will not close our hearts or hide our eyes to our own lostness and our own neediness and our own emptiness that is all tied up with that privilege and pride. Jesus is calling his righteous people to follow him in to the depths. Rejoice with me, he says. Come on in. Come into this place of welcome and refuge, this place of healing for those who have known horrors, this place of rejoicing for those who have been rebuked. Come into this space of hurting and rejection, which is also the place of homecoming and redemption, this space of forgottenness, which is also the place of forgiveness. Come in to experience the depths of this beloved community. Why? So that God will have a people who can show the world the heart of God, pulsing with love, beating with justice, flowing with goodness and mercy for everyone, first and last, lost and found, everyone, to know the heart of God. I want to end with a story. One of the people that I've known over the years was a retired police captain in Richmond, Virginia. By the time I knew him, he had been a police officer for a full 40 years, rising to the rank of captain and then retiring. While he was an active duty police officer, he was often working on Sundays and came to church only sporadically, though his wife and children were active every Sunday all through those years. But when he retired, he started coming with his wife every Sunday. They became involved with the Emmaus community, took the disciple Bible studies, got involved with the Kairos prison ministry and the Caritas shelter for homeless people in Richmond. When his wife endured a difficult battle with cancer, their faith grew only stronger. By the time she died, he was regarded as one of the pillars of that church. When we started small groups to have soul-searching conversations about racism and our own individual journeys around the struggles of race, he was one of the first to sign up. I remember being in his group. He and I were two of the 3 Euro-Americans, along with 3 African Americans. I'm pretty sure that he signed up because he thought it was the right thing to do. It was expected of a leader like him. At first, he had a defensive posture. Yes, he had done some things that he was now ashamed of, but he was just enforcing the law as a law enforcement officer. Then, as the group kept meeting, and he heard and listened to the stories of deep hurts and lasting wounds among people on the other side of that dynamic, people whose stories he had never sat down to listen to before, people with whom he shared the same faith, the same Lord. When he took the time to listen and to open his heart with empathy and his mind with understanding, something happened. Compassion broke through. At one meeting, this tough captain had tears rolling down his cheeks as he asked for forgiveness for how he had treated African Americans, even though it was the law. The tears turned into a huge smile as an African American man got up out of his seat and walked over to this retired Euro-American police captain and said, "Can I give you a hug?" As they stood there and embraced, everyone in the room was crying. I'm pretty sure that he came into that process in the posture of not being lost. He was there to help others. Then, as he entered into the space of listening to the hurts, opening his heart with empathy to the messy and complicated truth, realizing that he was not immune, he was implicated and still embraced, broken and still loved. That is the kind of thing Jesus wants us all to see and feel and know, not only for ourselves as individuals, but for our world as groups of peoples. Friends, we are all of us the precious treasures of a great power, a deep compassion that indwells us and undergirds the whole creation with an irrepressible desire for goodness and mercy and an indomitable determination to see that all the world comes to know the power of that love. In Jesus, we have a name and a face and a life for that love in action, in person. That love is still in action, even in these pandemic days. God is working through these messy times. We may think we're losing time, but God is not losing anything. God has not lost any time. God has not lost anyone, except those who refuse to come. Even though people are dying in this world, they are not lost to God, not by a long shot. It's not easy or simple or neat or tidy, but our awesome God is working to save the world, to show that the powers of sin and death have been overcome, and to usher in more and more the way of doing justice and loving kindness and walking humbly with God, which is the way of the cross and the resurrection of Jesus. I'm so happy that you've invited me to come today to rejoice with you in the heart of this good shepherd, this good homemaker, this loving parent. Because what we're doing here, now, rejoicing with one another in the love of Jesus, may just be among the most important things we ever get to do. Even across the barriers of this pandemic and amid the struggles for racial justice, especially in these troubled times, Jesus is calling us to rejoice with him, to set aside every other calling and to experience the depths of the joy that never ends in the embrace of his everlasting grace. So may it be. Amen.